Good afternoon. Welcome, students, staff, and our guests. Thank you for being here today. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Candida Shepherd. I am the Indigenous teacher here at Facey High School, and I am a proud member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. I'm very honored to be here today to dedicate these flags with you to our school and be a part of that Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was spoken of so long ago. So this is part of that journey. And part of that process will be to acknowledge and welcome all of you here on this territory here in Sherwood Park, Alberta. We are on the Treaty 6 territory, as well as the traditional homelands of the Métis, the Inuit, the Dene, the Cree, the Nakota, the Saulteaux, and many other cultures that come through these lands. And I welcome you here. We are all treaty people, and today we will be talking about that to some degree. I'd like to introduce to you a friend. Lloyd Cardinal is from Nahiawakwa Cree, from Wolf Lake, Alberta, of both Treaty and Métis ancestry, and his family is Eagle Clan. He is a proud Edmontonian, father of 3, and who has worked on both addictions and homelessness for the past 10 years, serving our city's most vulnerable population. Lloyd is missing and murdered and exploited Indigenous people advocate, family member, and survivor. Lloyd's goals are to strengthen allyship, develop legislative reform in pursuit of justice, healing, and reconciliation for all Canadians. And so as we begin this afternoon's presentation, I will hand it over to Lloyd, and thank you. Thank you very much for coming. And I have something to offer you. Lloyd, you're joining us today, and I'm very grateful for the teachings that you will be sharing with us, and that I know the Creator will bless our time here together.
This is on, right?
What is it?
It's not on. You guys hear me all? Everybody can hear me well? Okay, so I'd say, like she said, my name is Lloyd Cardinal, and from my understanding, I'm here to give you guys a little bit of teaching about the Treaty 6 flag and then the Métis flag and the little bit that I know about that. How many people here are aware that this is Treaty 6 territory? So have you always been aware, or is it something that has only been talked about in the recent years? In recent years, it's with this reconciliation that people talk about, that people are becoming more aware of the history of this land, right? So Treaty 6, does anybody know what Métis Nation it is? What zone? Okay, so it's zone 4 for Métis Nation. Is anybody here Métis? Can anybody raise their hands if they're Métis? Is anybody here First Nations treaty? Okay, so I'm going to tell you something that's interesting. I am both Métis and treaty, right? But in our government's eyes, you cannot be both. You're either or, right? But really, my grandmother was Métis, and on the other side, my grandmother was a treaty Indian. I come from a place called Wolf Lake, and at the same time, I also come from another First Nation called Beaver Lake Cree Nation. Wolf Lake used to be one of the 12 Métis settlements here in Alberta. Now there are only 8 that are recognized. Alberta is the only province that recognizes land-based Métis, right? And Wolf Lake was a settlement, but in the year, it was May 6, 1960, the land was rescinded. The rights were given away from the people and taken, in a sense, and the people were forced off of the land that day. Guess who forced them off of the land? The governments, yes, and they had the military enforce it. My grandfather served in World War II, right? He was a veteran of World War II. Could you imagine how he felt coming back from World War II and then being told one day to leave, right? Just all of a sudden. They also told him, you can't take everything, take what you can, take what you can, and basically just to go that day. And it forced a lot of Indigenous communities to in a sense, become disenfranchised and disconnected from their home community. A lot of people, they went up as far as High Prairie. Does anybody know where High Prairie is? A lot of people went to Satellite Cree Nation. Some people went to Onion Lake, right? But either way, they went many different places. And the interesting thing about that is that I'm related to people all over the place because of the separation that took place there, right? Now, with Beaver Lake Cree Nation, my grandmother came from the Beaver Lake Cree Nation. She was raised in Indian residential school. Pretty sure everybody knows about Indian residential schools. And you know what? She was raised in a place called DeBolt, that's by Lethbridge. And you know what? When she left Indian residential school, she was forced to be married. So you know what? She married my grandfather, who was from around a place called Goodfish. And you know what? They took away her treaty rights. But somehow through her life, she got the treaty rights back before she had passed away. I never got to know my grandmother, but I am also in the process of reclaiming my treaty status. I'm 41 years old, right? I've been working on that now for 11 years. It takes time to prove your connections to your family, your maternal grandparents. But at the same time, I can honestly just tell you that the government does not want us to be treaty. And I'm going to say that honestly. I guess we'll start out with a smudge. You don't have to smudge, right? One thing that we try to do is we smudge and we don't judge, right? But with that, we'll light some smudge. I'm going to do an opening prayer. If you don't pray, that's okay. I'll do the prayer for everyone, but we'll light the smudge now. And we can't smudge everybody that's here. There's too many people, right? So the idea is if you want to participate, you could just take your hand like this when the smudge is lit and bring it like this towards your chest. Just bring your hand like this and touch your chest. And that's good enough for today, right? So we'll get started like that. So does everyone here understand what smudging is? Probably not, eh? So, okay, smudging is a physical acknowledgement. We give thanks, right? We as Indigenous people, we believe in something we call Mother Earth. We also believe in a creator, God, right? Now, at the same time, each and every single day, we receive things from this land, right? So if we stop and we think about it, everything that is around us comes from this land. Your clothing, the chairs that you're sitting on, right? If you go even deeper than that, our bodies come from the land. Everything is interconnected, right? Everything is a part of nature. And you know what? We as Indigenous people, when the sun is first rising, when it's coming up early in the morning, we usually face the east. Some tribes face the south. And you know what? We give thanks. We smudge ourselves. We acknowledge our creator. We acknowledge Mother Earth. And we give thanks for everything that we have each and every single day. And each and every single day, the earth provides to us, whether we're considered good or bad people, and she does it without discrimination. So it's about mindfulness. It's about acknowledging, where did the food that you ate this morning, where did that come from, right? Who prepared that food, right? All of these things that we have each and every single day, like water. Can I ask you guys a question? Is water important?
Yes.
Yeah, water is life, right? And I could get into depth about water, but I'm not going to go there right now. But in this moment right now, what about family? Is family important?
Yes.
Are we thankful for our family? So we smudge ourselves. We smudge ourselves physically, like our bodies. It's like a physical acknowledgement to the Creator. And we give thanks for everything that we have each and every single day. And if you stop and you think about it, each and every single day, we are truly blessed. There are places in other parts of the world where people are truly struggling, right? And they don't have all the resources and all the things that we have. So we are like thankful in a sense, but see, if we can't find any reason to be thankful, the fault lies only in ourselves, right? So what are you thankful for in this moment? We have the smudge lit. If you want to participate, you can put your hand up and you can go like this towards your heart, right? I can demonstrate smudging for you guys. There. So I take my hands, I wash my hands with the smoke, I bring it to my eyes, to my ears, to my mouth, to see, hear, speak good things to the people around me. I bless my body like this. And I bring it to my heart and I give thanks. That's like a basic smudge. If you begin to smudge and you do smudging yourself, the more you do it, the more you're just gonna like develop your own understanding and style of whatever you choose to do when you light medicines. Does anybody here smudge in their homes? Nobody? Okay, right on. That's where we are. This is where we're at the beginning, right? So the medicine that we're burning is called sage, right? I'm like, it's a medicine that grows on the land. This looks like to me like it's, I think it's for.
Yeah.
No, it's Frog Lake, then it's buffalo sage, right? It's a medicine. And you know what? I quickly want to explain something about smudging. So in a room, when you light smudge like this, and you burn it and you go around the room and you smudge the room, scientists have studied smudging and like Native American smudging. And you know what? It's scientifically proven that there's bacteria in the air that's actually harmful for us to breathe in. But you know what? When you smudge the room once, it cleanses the room of that bacteria in the air that's harmful to us that we cannot see for 28 days. It actually cleanses the air in the room. It's a good thing, right? And if anybody here ever pick up on somebody's negative vibes or bad energy, well, guess what? It's excellent for clearing the room of that bad energy, right? So with that, we're just lighting the smudge, and I'm going to say a prayer now. This prayer comes from my ancestors. I'm going to say it in English so that people can understand. And here we go. Let's get started. Okay. I'm just going to say it without the microphone. Okay. Friend, do it in this way. That whatever you do in life, do the very best that you can with both your heart and your mind. And when you do it in this way, the power of the universe will come to your assistance if your heart and your mind are in unity. When one sits at the hoop of the people, one must be responsible because all of creation is related. And the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And the honor of one is the honor of all. And whatever we do affects everything in the universe. If you do it in this way, if you truly join your heart and your mind as one, whatever you ask for, that's the way it's going to be. Now with that, I'll say in my language, Naskuntana, no tawina, Naskamau, Semantu, hi. Okay, so now we got through the smudge. I think we'll start with the flags. Can I have a couple of volunteers to help me with the flags? Does anybody want to help? Okay, one of you guys come up. Is there a flag raising taking place today?
We did our official one with Elder Wilson last June.
Okay, all right, okay, so it's just a flag teaching, right? Okay. This will start with the first flag. But even though it's not the first flag, it's like kind of second. But the treaty comes first, right? Because Métis people, what do we know about Métis people? What are they? They're both what? Yeah, so European and Indigenous, right? So treaty people, most of the time are just Indigenous, but we'll get into that. So, okay, yeah, we got to probably hold it. That's backwards. Okay, so I'm not gonna try to make you guys too tired. I won't talk too long, but here we go. So what do we know about this flag? Okay, go ahead.
It has like the Union Jack.
So the Union Jack, which is what? Whose flag is that?
Great Britain.
Britain. Do we have anybody from Britain here? Yeah, so does anybody know about this flag? Does anybody know like the history behind that flag? The monarchy, right? Kings, queens, right? So we have the Union Jack in the back. And then what does it say on it? Treaty what? Treaty number 6, right? Treaty 6 territory, right? So does anybody know where Treaty 6 territory is? Is it just Edmonton or does it go into different provinces? Huh?
So, yeah.
Okay, so Treaty 6 is kind of like central Alberta, and it goes from Alberta into Saskatchewan, almost to the border of Manitoba. In Alberta, there are 5 treaties here, but there are only 3 with chief and council. So the other 2 are just territories that come in to the corners of Alberta, right? But we have Treaty 6, Treaty 7 to the south of us, Calgary, and then Treaty 8 up in northern Alberta. Those are the 3 treaties that are recognized here. Treaty 6 wasn't signed in Alberta. It was actually signed in a place called Fort Pitt, Saskatchewan, right? Now, there are 70 treaties in Canada between us, the Indigenous nations, and the Crown, right? Originally, when the first treaties were signed, they were signed between us and the Crown. But it came to a point where the Crown passed the responsibility of the treaties between Indigenous nations and the Crown to the federal and provincial governments, right? So now they are responsible for treaties. Now, what is a treaty? Can anybody tell me by raising their hand? What is a treaty? Go ahead.
Isn't it like an agreement?
An agreement. Does anybody else have an understanding of what a treaty is? It's an agreement. What else? Go ahead.
It's between several different bodies, 2 or more, and it has terms.
Yeah, so it's between several different bodies and it has terms. Could we call those bodies nations? So it's between nations, right? What else do we know about treaties? Are treaties like a promise? Like when you sit down and you sign a treaty with the government and you sign it, it's an agreement that you're honoring, right? So this treaty was signed in 1876, and it also says, as long as the sun shines and the rivers flow and the grass grows, right? Has anybody ever heard that before? So is the sun still shining? Is the river still flowing? And is the grass does it still grow?
Yeah.
Yes, so these agreements were struck 1876. This is one of many treaties. There are 11 numbered treaties that are recognized, right? Here, like that are the main treaties, right? Treaty 6 territory is the land that we are sitting on right now. Now, it goes back to the Royal Proclamation of 1763. Has anybody ever heard of the Royal Proclamation of 1763? So this was between the King George and the Indigenous nations of this land. And guess what? All nations gathered and met in one place, even from this territory. The tribes that are here, they sent emissaries to the gathering where they signed that agreement. And when they signed that agreement, this meant that the king was allowed to bring his people onto this land. And when these treaties were signed, they were signed in an agreement that we would share this land in peace and friendship. In peace and friendship. Now, another thing with treaty is that treaties, has anyone here ever read a treaty? Has anybody ever took the time to look up a treaty and read one? Can you tell me, what were they written in? They were written in hast thou and begat. Hast thou and begat. So you know what? Indigenous people, they didn't know anything about hast thou and begat. Indigenous people didn't write. We come from oral tradition. We come from memorizing things. We come from campfire to campfire, from grandfather to grandchild, having all of this traditional knowledge passed down to us, right? When a lot of the chiefs signed the treaties, when they signed treaties, they marked X, or guess what they did? They touched the pen. And you know why? Because they couldn't read or write. So they didn't even know what they were signing. And what happened at that time? On this land where we're standing right now, there used to be from 40 to 70 million bison on this land. Bison, right? They covered this land. You know the Great Plains? They're actually shaped by how many bison used to cover this land. What happened to the bison?
Hunted for sport.
They were hunted, right? The government used to give ammunition to people to hunt the bison and to clear out the bison, right? Now, by 1860, there were only about 400 bison left. They were wiped out. They were, in a sense, exterminated, right? Why did they kill off the bison? What was the point of killing them off? Yeah, so they couldn't keep on living their traditional way of life, and we would depend on them for survival, right? So the bison were wiped out, right? Now, this is part of the reason that the chiefs signed the treaties, because they were starving, right? And another thing too, what happened in the history? Indian residential schools, right? That's where they took the children away from their parents. And you know what? When this was done systemically, meaning across Canada, right? It was the law that your children must attend Indian residential schools. So you know what? I'm not trying to traumatize anybody here. I'm sharing the truth in the history with you, right? What are you going to do if somebody takes your children from you? Are you going to sign that treaty? Are you going to sign those agreements? Of course, right? It was all about control. It was all about taking away the traditional way of life of the Indigenous people. And it was also about the land, right? So we have here in this treaty picture, can anybody describe to me what you see here? We have a traditional Indigenous man.
Yeah, so it looks like there's Indigenous and then somebody else, and they're like shaking hands, or it's like an agreement.
Yeah, and there's a hatchet in the ground. They're kind of like burying the hatchet. They're saying, we're not going to fight. We're going to sign this treaty. We're going to share this land in peace and friendship. And that's what the agreement was. As long as the sun shines and the rivers flow and the grass grows, right? Now, with this treaty and this agreement, this is the flag that was made. There was a song that was made to go with the flag. And the song was made by our ancestors. Are you guys tired? You guys want to put it down? Are you good? You're good. Okay. So put it down, or they can hold it up. It's up to you. Or you can switch off. Okay. So when the treaties were signed, especially like this one in particular, it was signed between Queen Victoria and the Indigenous nations of this territory, right? And the flag, yes, it comes from around like the year 1900, but the song that I'm going to sing for you comes from my ancestors. They made this song in the year 1900. Does everybody know about the recent passing of the Queen?
Yes.
Yeah, so you know what? I was asked to go and sing for her at the legislature for her memorial. And you know what? When they contacted me, I went there. And you know what? I personally, I don't like hate on people, right? I know she was the Queen. I know that there was a treaty that wasn't exactly honored between us and many other Indigenous nations. But I also know the responsibility of the treaty was passed on to the federal and provincial government. And I know that she was like kind of like a figurehead. She didn't make all of the decisions, right? And at the same time, my ancestors, there's a song that we sing. It's called the Treaty 6 Flag Song. And it actually honors her. She's mentioned in the song, and it honors this treaty, this agreement. So whenever they have ceremonies, like within government, within the municipality, the provincial, the federal, they will raise this flag and they will sing songs, like flag songs that honor the treaties and the agreements, right? So I'll tell you the words of the song. It says, Kechoke Masque, which means the queen. And then it says, Kechoke Masque, Yahweh, Yahweh, ha, Keke me kono, Esque we hon, Kakike, Kawi we pastan, Yao hey, yao hey, yao hey. So what it's actually saying is the queen, she gave us the flag to blow onto the wind forever. That's what it's saying. She gave us the flag to blow onto the wind forever. So with that, I'll sing you guys the song, okay? Yeah, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh, ah, yeah, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh, ah, Yahweh, ah. We are oh, hey. Yahweh, Yahweh, ah. We are oh, hey. Yahweh, Yahweh, ah. We are oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Yechoke masque, Yahweh, Yahweh, ah, Keke me kono, Esque we hon, Kakike, Kawi we pasta, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Yeah, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh, ah, yeah, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh, ah, Yahweh, ah, we are, oh, hey. Yahweh, 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 oh, hey. Yahweh, 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 oh, hey. Yahweh, Yahweh. Yechoke masque, Yahweh, Yahweh, ah. Que me kono, Esque hon, Yahweh, Kakike, Kawi we pasta, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Okay. So that's just a little bit about treaties. Like, you know what? Because I explained what I explained today, you won't be an expert on treaties. It takes a long time to understand treaty, to understand the agreements that were struck. But I'll tell you this, if the government owned all of the land already, then why would they need treaties with us, right? Another thing too, in the treaty, it says the people that came to this land, that settled on this land, they were allowed to use the depth of a plow 6 inches into the earth. Whenever you go past 6 inches into the earth, right, you have to consult with Indigenous nations. If you're mining, if you're going for oil, this is why you always see interactions between First Nations leadership and government, right? They have to talk to the First Nations and they have to consult and they have to agree upon areas where they actually collect resources, right? So with this is our last flag of the day. Can I get 2 more volunteers? This one takes a little bit of explaining too. Go ahead, come up. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, so what do we know about this flag? Can anybody tell me anything by raising your hand? What do we know about this flag? Do you know anything about this flag over there? The one next to you. Yeah. Her. She has a gray sweater on. Yeah. Do you know anything about this flag? Métis flag. What else do you know about it? The 2 cultures together. Okay. Anybody else? How old is this flag? So this flag comes from around the year 1816, 1817. There's people that differ, like even historians, they differ on when this flag first came about. But from my understanding, and also being Métis, it was around 1816, 1817, and it was after a battle. The battle was called the Battle of the 7 Oaks. Now, this is the oldest patriotic flag on this land, right? This flag is way older than the Canadian flag. Can anybody here tell me how old is the Canadian flag? Is it hundreds of years old or what? This guy knows, right? Do you know when the flag?
150, isn't it?
No, but 150, that's Confederation, but the flag actually comes from the Democrats. What year was it? Does anybody here know? Like, Andy? Yeah, well, the Canadian flag, yeah, like it's not very old. It's not very old at all. Now, this flag comes from around 1816, and they say that it was given to the Métis people by the Hudson's Bay Company. Does anybody shop at the Hudson's Bay? Okay, never mind. All right. So what is the symbol here? Is it an 8 laying on its side? Is it an infinity symbol? What is it?
Infinity.
It's infinity. They use it in mathematics, right? And it means what it means, right? It's never ending, right? It's continuous, right? Now, right here, we have the blood of the European people, right? And then we have the blood of the First Nations people. What happened? They mixed, right? But when they mixed, they created one distinct people, the Métis Nation of Canada, in our case, the Métis Nation of Alberta, right? Now, with this mixture of the blood, are they First Nations? Are they European? They are, but guess what? They don't want to be acknowledged as European. They don't want to be acknowledged as First Nations. They are Métis people, right? Métis, in our language, we would say, Happy Togasun. Can anybody say that? Happy Togasun. And you know what? In the Cree language, it's actually a derogatory term. It's like, it's not good to say that to somebody, but you know what it means? It means mixed blood, right? Now, has anybody here ever heard of Louis Riel? Who is Louis Riel? Somebody tell me about Louis Riel by raising your hand. Let's just begin with, like, who was Louis Riel? Where did he come from? Red River? Was Riel an educated man? Okay, so Louis Riel was educated, like, in a sense, when a time when a lot of Indigenous people were not educated, right? And you know what? Louis Riel, they called him the Red Priest. They called him the Red Priest. Now, Louis Riel was also a member of Parliament, right? He held a seat in Parliament, right? And if it wasn't for Louis Riel, there would be no Métis Nation, right? He fought for the rights of both Métis and First Nations people. He did not discriminate, right? But one of the things in history, what happened to Louis Riel? Anybody else? Does anybody know what happened to Louis Riel?
Oh, yeah, actually.
He was executed, right? So he was hung for treason in 1888, right? Does anybody here know why? What happened? What led to him being charged with treason? Yes, so Louis Riel was hung for treason in 1888, right? And it was because he resisted the expansion of Canada. We know that the railway, the Canadian Pacific Railway, was being built, and at this same time, it was displacing Indigenous people. It was displacing Métis people. And guess what Louis Riel said to the Canadian government? He said no. He said no to them, and he resisted them. There was even a battle that took place. But you know what? In the end, Riel was hung for treason in 1888, right, in Regina. Now, the interesting thing with Riel is he was hung for treason, so he was a criminal, right? But now they call him a hero, right? They call him a hero. If it wasn't for Louis Riel, Canada would have not came into Confederation when it did in 1867. And another thing too, Manitoba would not have become a province if it wasn't for Louis Riel. And you know, Manitoba, that's actually an Indigenous name. When we say the Creator God in our language, we say Mantu, Mantu. Well, Manitoba, it's named after the Creator, right? So, what is a Métis person? What does it take to make a Métis person? What kind of bloodline do you have to have in order to be Métis? Because not everyone can be recognized as a Métis. Indigenous and European. So what kind of Indigenous and what kind of European? French. What else? French. French is one. Go ahead. Okay. So, you know, French, Scottish, and Irish mixed with either Soto, like Cree, is what makes a Métis person. Some people argue Inuit, and some people differ on that. But here in Alberta, Alberta is the only province that recognizes land-based Métis. And in order to be Métis, you have to prove your ancestry, right? Now, because of the history with the Métis people, the Métis people had everything to do with the shaping and development of this country. They were at every single like major event in Canada's history. They participated, right? And Métis people, you got to think about it. They were intermarrying Métis people, like we're intermarrying for 200 years before Canada came into Confederation. You know what? My grandfather used to say it like this: who was here first? And then we would say us, the natives, right? And then he'd say, who came here second? And then we would say the white man. And then you know what he would say? And 9 months later, along came the Métis, right? Because they mixed. And it had a lot to do with the fur trade. It had a lot to do with how this country was formed and shaped, right? Métis people play a big part in our history, right? And see, in Alberta, this is Métis region zone 4, right? And so we have the Métis flag here. This flag in Western Canada is blue. What color is it when you go out east? Red, right? And guess what? Métis people with this flag, part of the reason with the red, it's like the blood of the people, right? So we're gonna play the Métis national anthem here.
The long one.
Yeah, you guys, if you want, you can stand. If you can't, I understand. There we go. There's the different zones.
In the forest, on the river, and across the western plain. One journeyed westward to the land of the Indians. Métis was created, a new nation rose up strong. Hardship has its destiny, and it's cursed to not belong. In the land from which they came, in the land they helped to build, they found themselves found their vision unfulfilled. Despite their valiant efforts to defend what they believe, when at last the battle ended, they were only left to grieve. We are ready to be unity, watch our nation rise again. Never forgotten people with the truth in their hands. From across the plain they traveled, from Red River to the sea, looking for their own homeland that would help them to replace all the land that had been taken and the dreams that had been dashed. Their brave heroes now completed and courageous deeds now past. But their spirit was not broken and their dreams had never died. Their determination strengthened even while the people cried. As they waited for the battle that would end their years of pain, and the final bloodless battle when the nation rose again. We are proud to be Métis, watch our nation rise again. Never forgotten people. For the fuel generation and the future once to come. With the past to motivate us, it will help to keep us strong. As we build the empty nation as we watch it rise again. Our blood lost of motivation to inspire our future again. We're not proud to reach humanity, watch our nation rise again. Never more forgotten people with the true Canadians. We are the great community. Watch our nation rise again. Never more forgotten people with the true Canadians.
Okay, so that's the Métis national anthem, and I'm noticing that I said 8 zones earlier. It's 6 zones. I just want to clarify that. There are 6 zones recognized within Alberta. And Métis people also have hunting rights like treaty people, right? Pretty much they say treaty and Métis is kind of similar now when it comes to rights because of recent bills passed through legislation in Ottawa. Now, I guess the last thing I'm going to say about today is that what does it mean that we are all treaty people? I come from Edmonton. I live in Edmonton. And you know what? We had a mayor that recently stepped down and a new one came in. His name was Mayor Don Iveson. And you know what? He had a message to everyone that we are all treaty people. So meaning that we are all beneficiaries of these agreements. We all benefit from this land, and at the same time, they call it sharing the river of life, sharing the river of life. And you know what it meant? It meant that the Indigenous people would govern themselves. And you know what? At the same time, the Queen, she would govern herself and her people, and we would share this land in peace and friendship and prosper, right? That's the original agreement of the treaties, right? What does it mean that we are all treaty people? You know, that's the question that I'll ask you today. And if the government owned all of the land already, then why would they need to have treaties with First Nations people, right? Another thing I'm gonna throw out there to let you guys think about, there is a lot of land that nobody is standing on right now. Land that is not even being used, right? There's a lot of land and territories where treaties were not even signed between the Indigenous nations and the Crown. They're unceded territories, meaning that there is no agreements. And guess what? Through court, Indigenous people are slowly beginning to have this truth acknowledged, right? Other than that, I think, you know, does anybody have any questions? Can I ask, is this a different class for you guys? Is this a different kind of a gathering? Have you guys never had this discussion before? Yeah. So I'm going to suggest to you guys, there's a website called the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Look up the TRC. At the same time, if you have time, look up the treaties, look up the agreements that were created and made between the Indigenous nations and the Crown here on this land, right? I'm going to tell you, when I went to the singing for the Queen and everything like that, I even learned that there's a king now. His name's King Charles. He has to come and meet with the Indigenous nations of this land, and they have to kind of swear like an oath together, and they have to carry on a discussion about treaties, right? Because treaties impact our everyday lives, whether we are aware of it or not. So with that, that's all I have to say.
I see you brought your Pope beads.
Yeah.
So yeah, yours are black, eh?
Yeah. So you know what? If there's no questions, anybody? No questions?
Wait, that was amazing. Thank you. Guest speaker, I also want to thank the administration from the IPS for being here and being a part of this journey with us. Thank you for our students, all the teachers that took time out of their instructional time to bring students in here. And thank you guys for your respect and for the way that you've honored us in this last hour. That I'm very grateful for how you did that. And last and most importantly, Lloyd, I really appreciate that you joined us today, coming out of, he was scraping a moose hide earlier today, so he zoomed over to do this with us. So I'm very grateful you did this. And in appreciation, I want to give this to you as a gift. So thank you so much. Thank you.